Hello! It's been a while, hasn't it? In November I was extremely busy with work and we were trying to complete NaNoWriMo, so I thought that I would roll over my October wrap up into my November wrap up and do a joint wrap up for both months in December. It is now December, so that's what I'm doing in this video. The first book I finished reading in October was At the Side of the Sugar Plum by Mary Cooper, which is set during the Black Death, the plague that ravaged Europe during the 17th century. It's narrated by Hannah, who is a teenage girl who is from the country, but she's come to London to live with her sister Sarah and help her in her sweetmeats shop. Sarah wrote to her asking for her to come, but when she gets there it turns out that Sarah more recently wrote telling her not to come because of the plague. Hannah isn't put off by the plague at all. She's so excited to be in London that she convinces her sister to let her stay and that they will be fine, the plague won't touch them. Oh boy, are they wrong. I found this book quite hard to get into at first. The author dropped in a lot of terminology to kind of establish the setting, and it made the narrator's voice seem quite stilted. It became less irritating after the first few chapters and I really got into the story. I learnt a lot from reading this book. I didn't know that much about the Black Death before. I knew that it devastated Europe, that massive amount of people had died, but I didn't know about the specifics of life whilst the plague was going on. I didn't know about what the government did about it, and I didn't know how much corruption there was that went along with the plague. So all the royal family and the aristocracy fled London quite early on. The people in charge set up all these rules to try to combat the spread of the plague, but of course they didn't really know what they were doing because they didn't understand the biology of it like we do now. So they did things which were pretty horrible and desperate, like locking up houses where someone had died from the plague for several weeks. And this meant that people who hadn't got the plague would inevitably get the plague and die because they were locked up in the house. If they were there at the time, they weren't allowed to leave. Someone would guard the house to make sure they didn't leave. And this was obviously really corrupt. You know, they might eat the food that was meant to be for the people. They might be bribed to let people go. There were also other forms of corruption going on, so there were these women who would come to inspect the bodies after people had died to see if they had died of the plague, and they were frequently bribed to say that somebody had not died of the plague so that the other people living in the house could get out of being locked up. And I didn't know about any of this stuff before. It was also really interesting to learn about the running of a sweetmeat shop. They make all these delicious sounding treats out of sugar and fruit or flowers, and that was quite fun as well. There was also a little bit of romance in this book, which I wasn't expecting because it's about the plague, but that was fun too, and it also raised the stakes in a way. I was reading it and waiting for really devastating things to happen. It made it very, very dramatic, as you might expect from reading a book about the plague. It was always quite nerve-wracking. I was constantly turning the pages, waiting for somebody important to the main character to die, and that kind of kept me going through the book. And I think that made up for the narration that I didn't get into at first. It wasn't the most amazing writing, and I never felt like I really fully became properly absorbed in the story, but it was a fun read and I did learn a lot from it. So I would recommend it if you want to know more about that period, or if you know a teenager who wants to know more about that period or who likes historical fiction. It's quite a quick read, and when I finished it I was surprised to learn there is a sequel set during the Great Fire of London, so I am quite intrigued by that and will hopefully pick it up at some point in the future. The second book I finished reading in October is Editing Emma. This is a proof copy, but it's not my proof copy, it's my friend Jim at YA's copy. By the time he watches this video, this will be back in his own hands, I'm sure. So Editing Emma is by our other friend Chloe Seager, who is an agent and also now a writer. She runs #BookClubYA with me. She does the organisation, the booking the venue and the coming up with the questions. I do the social media. I do the social media for all the #YA events that happen in London, Drink YA and Picnic YA. and any other hashtag YA events we may come up with in the future. I do this mostly with Jim again. So I was really excited to read her first book, and I wasn't disappointed at all. It was a lot of fun. Editing Emma is about a girl called Emma who at the start of the summer holidays is ghosted by her boyfriend. He just completely stops responding to her messages and her phone calls and everything. And so when she starts back at school and he's still really ignoring her, she doesn't really know what to do. He's got a new girlfriend, and so she thinks that she should go out there and get herself a new boyfriend. And she decides to do this through the internet and to document her adventures on a private blog. I really love the idea of a private blog. I think it's just great. It's the latest version of the diary novel, which I'm sure many people watching this will love. I loved diary novels. When I was a teenager, I loved diary novels now. But obviously nowadays people are less likely to keep a paper diary and more likely to keep an online diary. I really like the idea of the secret blog, especially because she has it on her phone, so she could do things like sit in a corner at a party and update her blog, which I could totally relate to, because sometimes when I felt stressed or overwhelmed in a situation, I've sat down with a notebook and I've just written down everything that's running through my head to try to get some control over my own thoughts and my anxiety and to make sense of the situation. I thought that was just brilliant. It's also really funny. I laughed out loud several times whilst reading this book, which is a very high compliment for me, as I do not laugh out loud at most books that are described as laugh out loud funny. But I really enjoyed this one. I also liked that it tipped slightly towards the older end of YA because of some of the issues it dealt with, and that was really nice because I think that a lot of funny young adult literature is really heavily targeted at the younger end of the YA spectrum, for lack of a better word. Anyway, it's really funny. I really enjoyed reading about the situations Emma gets herself into, and I would recommend it to you. The third book I finished reading was actually a book I finished listening to, and that was The Girl of Ink and Stars by Kiran Millwood Hargrave. I really enjoyed this in the end. It was a really brilliant adventure, and it included some of my favourite tropes: the girl who is to dress as a boy, a long journey partly on horseback and walking and forest and sea and all this exciting stuff that I love. However, it took me a little while to get into it. I remember the first couple of weeks I was listening to it, I went really slowly, and at one point I had restarted it to see if I could try and get into it again, because I just really lost the habit of listening to it. And I think it's because I just didn't like the narrator very much. I'm very fussy about audiobook narrators, but the story itself is really fun and also quite affecting. It's a middle grade novel about a girl who lives on this island that is ruled by this evil governor who has a daughter, and the daughter is the only person he really seems to care about in the world. He's quite cruel and demanding, and he's made the island's life a misery basically since he's been there. One day the narrator and the daughter of the governor go to school, and they find out that one of their classmates is missing, and all these strange things have been happening on the island with the animals, and so they're really worried about what's going on. They end up having an argument, and the daughter of the governor decides to run off and try and find out what's going on by herself. You know, she wants to redeem herself in the eyes of her best friend, but the narrator then discovers that this girl has been found dead, and so she wants to go and save her best friend before it's too late. And the story just goes from there, and when I got into it, no thanks to the narrator I'm afraid, I really enjoyed it, and I would recommend it. The fourth book I finished reading in October was Genuine Fraud by Lockhart. Now, Lockhart is one of my favourite authors. I've read all of her other books, and for the most part I have loved them. There were some where I had, you know, ambiguous feelings. You know, I feel like they gave me a lot of food for thought, but I didn't necessarily enjoy them so much, and that's great. I think that's still the mark of a brilliant author. Unfortunately, I'm sad to say that Genuine Fraud is definitely my least favourite book by Lockhart. I think that's because I was expecting a twist. I guessed what would happen in the end, So this story is told backwards. It's very hard to describe, so I'm not going to, because I don't want to spoil it for anyone who might be interested in reading it. And I know that a lot of people have really, really enjoyed it. However, because I guessed what was going to happen, I was kind of hoping there would be a twist and that I would be wrong, and I wasn't wrong. I did find it compulsive reading, but I just didn't get anything out of the story. So unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to say that this is the one Lockhart book that just doesn't do it for me. And that's fine, because she is one of my favourite authors and I have loved almost all of her other books. So there we go. There has to be one that I don't like so much, and Genuine Fraud is it. The fifth and final book I finished reading in October was Moxie, which I read for hashtag book club YA. I was really, really glad that this was the book that was selected for the book club, because I had heard a lot of hype about it, lots and lots of good things, and let me tell you, I was not disappointed in the slightest. It was such a good pick for a book club. So it's about a girl who starts a zine after being inspired by her mum's past and the Riot Girl movement to combat sexism at her high school. And it has this effect which is at first quite subtle, and then it becomes more and more dramatic, and it pulls the girls together. And there's so many wonderful examples of different kinds of girls and female friendship, and it touches on intersectionality in a really great way, and it was just such a lovely book, and I enjoyed it so much. And it had that tension of there being serious issues, but also didn't make it depressing. It reminded me of The Hate You Give in that way, because The Hate You Give, although it deals with incredibly tough issues, there's so many moments of lightness and of community that it all just seems to flow together, and I think that this works really well to sweep you up emotionally in the story. And that's what happened with Moxie, and I loved it and would strongly recommend it. There was so much to talk about at book club. We could talk about the zines and the friendships and family and romance. It has it all, this book. So yeah, give it a go. That's the end of part 1 of my October-November wrap up. For the wrap up of November's book, click the card or the link in the description box now. Bye. I'm trying to read this. Why is a car alarm going off when I want to film a video?